The revenge plan. I've always been a methodical person. It's what made me good at debugging complex systems. So when I decided that Sarah needed to pay for what she'd done, I approached it the same way I'd approach any challenging technical problem, with patience, planning, and obsessive attention to detail. The first step was accepting that this was going to be a long game. Sarah was now my boss, in a position of power, with the apparent trust of the executive team. A direct confrontation would accomplish nothing. It would just look like sour grapes from someone who didn't get the promotion. No, this had to be surgical. I started by documenting everything. Every email I'd sent Sarah about my strategic plans, every draft I'd shared with her, every conversation we'd had about the direction of the engineering department. I went through my chat logs, my version control history, even my notebook where I'd sketched out initial ideas. I was building a timeline, creating an irrefutable record of my intellectual property. But documentation alone wouldn't be enough. I needed to understand Sarah's weaknesses, her patterns, her blind spots. So I started watching her more carefully, not as a friend, but as a system to be analyzed. What I discovered was fascinating and disturbing in equal measure. Sarah was incredibly good at taking credit for other people's work, but she was terrible at actually doing the work herself. In her first month as director, she kept assigning me to handle the technical details of implementing her strategic vision. She'd sit in meetings, speak confidently about the plan, but when it came time to dive into specifics, she'd always defer to me or other team members. She was also paranoid about being exposed. I noticed her staying late, not to work, but to go through other people's computers and documents. She'd ask seemingly innocent questions about what projects people were working on, who they were collaborating with, what ideas they were developing. She was essentially conducting surveillance on her own team. This gave me an idea. If Sarah was so worried about people discovering her patterns, what would happen if I gave her something irresistible to steal? Something that looked brilliant on the surface but would expose her incompetence when she tried to implement it. I started working on what I called Project Trojan Horse. On the surface, it looked like a revolutionary approach to our database architecture. A complete redesign that would solve our scaling issues and reduce costs by 40%. I created beautiful diagrams, wrote compelling technical documentation, even built a small proof of concept that seemed to validate the approach. But here's the thing. I'm really good at my job, and I knew exactly how to make something look brilliant while being fundamentally flawed. The architecture I designed would work perfectly for the first few months, maybe even the first year. But as data volume increased, as usage patterns evolved, it would fail catastrophically. Not just fail in ways that would be expensive, embarrassing, and completely preventable if you actually understood the underlying technology. I spent 3 months perfecting this trap, making sure it was seductive enough that Sarah wouldn't be able to resist, but poisonous enough that it would eventually destroy her credibility. Then I started leaving breadcrumbs. I'd work late, leaving my laptop open with the confidential project documents visible. I'd have phone calls with fictional consultants, just loud enough for Sarah to overhear, discussing how this new architecture could revolutionize everything. I even printed out some of the more impressive diagrams and left them in places where I knew she'd see them. But the masterstroke was the fake email thread. I created a series of emails between myself and a made-up contact at a major tech company, discussing how they were interested in hiring me specifically because of my innovative database architecture work. I made sure to leave this thread open when Sarah inevitably snooped through my email during one of her late-night office raids. The bait was set. Now I just had to wait. It didn't take long. Within 2 weeks, Sarah scheduled a one-on-one meeting with me to discuss some exciting new technical initiatives. She started asking carefully worded questions about database optimization, scaling strategies, architectural approaches. She was fishing, trying to get me to reveal what I was working on. I played coy, acting like I was protective of my side project, but letting slip just enough details to make her even more curious. I could practically see the gears turning in her head. Here was another brilliant technical strategy she could steal and take credit for. A month later, Sarah announced to the executive team that she'd been working on a groundbreaking database architecture redesign. She presented my diagrams, my documentation, MY proof of concept as her own revolutionary vision. The executives ate it up, praising her technical brilliance and innovative thinking. They approved the project immediately, allocating a significant budget and timeline for implementation. Sarah was tasked with leading the entire initiative. And that's when the Raol plan kicked into gear.